Time for another episode for Inclusion Talks, looking at everything to do with all ability in sport. And it's a great pleasure to be here again today. My name is Dan Lonigan. I've got Cindy McDougall with me. We'll introduce Cindy in a second, and our very special guest today. We're here, of course, for Aussie Home Loans, who deal with anyone in Australia. They've got clients in every state and capital. They do Zoom as well, which we're doing for this podcast, and we do for all our podcasts, which you can stream and can get access to on all different social media platforms, including Spotify, iTunes, etc. Areas of expertise for Aussie Home Loans include purchasing a property, owner-occupied or investment, building a property portfolio, refinancing, debt consolidation, cash out, construction, pre-approvals, first home buyers, equipment loans, car loans, personal loans, and we've got over 25 lenders on our panel. Cindy, welcome again. Good to have you with us.
Yeah, it's great to be back as always, Dan. I love it. Fantastic.
Now, tell us about our guest today.
So today on our episode of Inclusion Talks, we welcome Sydney-based wheelchair athlete and coach, Julie Charlton. Julie is a multiple international Australian representative, having competed at the Birmingham Commonwealth Games, the 2024-2019 Oceania Championships, 2016 IWAS Junior Championships, which is the International Wheelchair and Amputee Sport Federation, and has achieved incredible medaling success in her events. Most recently, she did medal multiple times at the 2024 Oceania Games in Fiji. Julie continues to compete at the highest level, but has switched some of her focus to coaching and building the next generation of track and field talent. And in recognition of her incredible coaching ability, she was named the 2019 Sport New South Wales Youth Coach of the Year. Off the track, Julie is a human rights activist, public speaker, a proud volunteer, and also a trailblazer for building inclusion in parasport and equality and inclusion for people with a disability. She's currently studying a Bachelor of Sports Coaching and Management in the hope of using her learnings to support the growth of parasport and to become a coach to all levels, right up to international level. Today, we will learn about what drives her passion for sport, her journey to elite sport, and everything in between. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's great to have you on. Now, you were born with spina bifida. That was a major impact for you hating sport as a young child. Can you explain to our listeners what it was that stood out for you about not being involved and what it was that made you feel different and maybe what changed that?
So for me growing up, I actually was really lucky. I had a really strong sense of disability pride. I started working as a disability advocate when I was 7 years old. So I actually loved my disability and everything that it brought to me and the opportunities it provided me to share awareness with the world. However, it was the discrimination and the lack of inclusion in school sport that stopped me from being able to love sport at a young age. So my first school, from kindergarten to year 3, all they would let me do was play catch with an aid. So if anyone wants to play catch, I'm an expert at it. But that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to go play, footy with my friends or play basketball or, just at least join in with my school friends. But that wasn't an option for me in those early years because the teachers didn't know anything about inclusive sport or even just inclusive measures to make sport inclusive. And so I changed schools and I went to the American International School, which used to be, in the heart of Western Sydney, and it was fantastic. And my PE teacher there, Mr. Butcher, he did his degree over in England, and they do so much more inclusive education training over there for their teachers than they will ever do here. And he sat me down the age of 7. He's just like, so you've never done sport? I'm like, nope. He's like, well, I'm going to change that. And so he handed me my first shot put 15 minutes before my first ever competition, taught me how to use it, and I won my first ever first place ribbon. And from that day, I haven't looked back. I honestly fell in love with the sport, but more importantly, it was somebody taking the time to sit down, actually use their inclusive education knowledge to change my life
remove the barrier.
Remove the barrier to actually change my life and make sport inclusive for me. I never thought that this was going to be a path for me. I never thought I would be, representing Australia in sport. I thought I was going to become a drama teacher. I thought I was going to be in theatre because that's where my parents met. But this is something that has completely changed my life, and I wouldn't change it for the world. And it's definitely thanks to Mr. Butcher. Unfortunately, that school closed down, and I had to move schools again. And I faced a lot more discrimination in sport with school teachers. But again, I got another PE teacher from England named Mr. Muir, and he continued that journey for me as a young kid, all the way until year 12.
So you've been both a track and field athlete. When you were younger, what did that competition look like? So once you got taught how to throw the shot put and you knew you were good at it, what did competition then look like? Was it just schools based, or did you get to take it further?
So when I first started, I'm not one that half-asses things. So I went full-fledged ahead and represented New South Wales by the end of that season at the first, at the time it was the Para National Championships, when we actually had funding for a separate Para Championships. I know, wow. Miraculous, right? This was 2008, so very long time ago. But I got to go to, my first one was in Canberra, and I got to represent New South Wales in Canberra, which was absolutely amazing to be surrounded by people just like me who obviously have been in the sport a hell of a lot longer, but loved it as much as I did and taught me how to love it.
Gave you a community.
It made me feel part of the family. And that was an incredible experience. And I was also like, I was hooked. I was just like, I have to keep doing this. And then I, competed in Bendigo the next year, and it just kept going and going and going.
Did you just do throwing, or did you do all events back then?
So back then, from 2008 to 2012, that was just throwing, and I was doing it standing. So I was an F42 at the time, and I was doing it standing, trying not to fall out of the circle. But wow. It was really cool. And then 2012, I met Rosemary Little, who was a bronze medalist Paralympian from London, and she met me at one of my school comps, and they cancelled my discus, and I didn't want to lose out on the money that I'd spent on discus, so I entered the 100 meters because why not. And I sprinted in my day chair, so my regular wheelchair.
Oh, wow.
And I got to the end, dying at the end, but she was there, and she's like, if you can go that fast in your day chair, let's get you into a track chair. And then that's how she introduced me to Wheelchair Sports New South Wales ACT.
So how different is, for those that don't know, Julie, is the day chair to a track chair? Oh,
it's incredibly different. So you think of a regular wheelchair. So like on a parking thing, you've got your two big wheels at the front, you've got your two small wheels at the front. It's basically a square, and you sit in it. Whereas the racing wheelchair is very, very, very long. It's got two big wheels at the back. It's got one wheel at the front, and you sit in it like you are sitting on your legs, like kneeling on your legs. And you push with your two front knuckles on a push rim that's about yay wide, about as wide as a 5-cent piece. And you basically, you use your knuckles to push on that push rim. And it's big sweeping motions of your arm, and it's fully just using that momentum of your upper body to push it. Whereas a day chair or a regular wheelchair, you're kind of just using a normal pushing motion that propels the wheelchair.
Did it take you long to adjust to the racing chair?
About a year, I would say, before I got fully comfortable. They did push me into doing some pretty big races in my first year, like the Ausday 10K. But that was an incredible experience. I really loved doing the Ausday 10K. But it took me about a year to feel truly comfortable and able to be free in the chair, because especially when you're doing road races, it's scary to get up to like 30, 40 kilometers an hour when the only protection you have is a helmet. So yeah, it took a while, but it was good.
Do you still do wheelchair racing, or are you focused on throws now?
Yeah, so I'm focusing on throws now. Unfortunately, in 2019, I was helping set up the throwing chair for one of my athletes, and I smashed my finger with a hammer. And so I couldn't bend this finger for quite some time, and I've still got a scar there. And then the pandemic hit, and I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'm taking a break. But I'd started taking a little bit of a break before that because I just got onto the team for Oceanias in 2019. And I didn't want to get injured, and I only got in for throws. So I was like, okay, let's focus just on throwing for a little bit. And then the pandemic hit, and I'm like, okay, I guess I have an excuse to back away. But I still love it. I do want to go back recreationally, but throwing is where my passion is.
When did you realise that you might be really, really good at the throwing events?
I haven't realised that yet, Cindy.
That is awesome, because that means there is more and better things to come.
Exactly. I think a better way is like, when did I realize I loved it?
Yep.
Was when I was able to be part of a schooling sport community. So I was able to compete alongside my friends. I was able to actually join in at school carnivals rather than just being the water girl, or the point keeper, or I don't know, handing out the medals at the end.
Menial jobs.
Yeah, the menial jobs that, yes, are fun to be a part of, but I wanted to be an athlete. I wanted to be like everybody else in that way. So yeah, it was definitely when I was able to, especially when in the longer distance races, hop in my racing wheelchair and then lap my friends, because they would just be jogging the 1500, and I'm like, okay, bye. So
I must admit, that's my favourite part of watching the wheelchair racing, when you're at what we call shield level down here, and you're sitting there watching the races with the race, like your race wheelchairs with your able-bodied runners, and they just lap them, and you can see it on the faces of some of them that they absolutely hate it, but I absolutely love it.
They're just like, shoot, and they speed up a little bit, and so then we chase them.
Yeah, I love it. On your throwing chair, you mentioned how you got the injury setting them up. Can you give our listeners a bit of an idea on how a seated throws event works? Because for people who haven't seen one before, both the way the event works and the manner in which you actually throw the implement and the way that you're attached to your chair is quite different, and it's very different to able-bodied or even your ambulant disability throws. Could you explain sort of the equipment, and if it's specialised, and how it's set up?
Yeah, absolutely. So with seated throws, the very technical thing is that it looks like a stool, so a square stool, and the minimum width is 30 centimeters, and the maximum height is 75 centimeters. So think of a square stool. It can basically be as big as you want, but has to be minimum 30 centimeters wide. It has hooks on each corner that are where you attach your tie-down straps. And in a professional competition, you place the chair onto a either metal plate that has holes all around the perimeter, or if you've got a proper setup in a shot put circle or a discus circle, they'll have eyelets screwed into the actual circle itself. So you place the chair in the middle, or whatever position that the athlete wants it to be in, depending on their seating style and their throwing style. Place the chair down and then use ratchet straps, hook those onto the hooks on the chair, and then the other end into the holes of either the plate or the throwing circle. Tie that down, so ratchet it down, and so the chair is secure, so it can't go anywhere. Then the athlete hops onto the chair, and then they have either between 3 to 4 minutes to tie themselves down. Depending on the disability, they can get help, but my disability, I can't get any help from anybody to tie myself down. So I have to strap my legs down, I have to strap my hips down, and then I just make sure that I am completely stable. My favorite rule in the rule book is my ischial tuberosity may not leave the seat at any point. So it just means your butt bone can't lift. So yeah, I really do make sure that my hips are tied down to the seat, and then you throw.
Well, why can't you get assistance? Why do you have to do it yourself, Julie?
So it's to make it all fair. So if somebody in my classification, so the classifications are everybody who has the same disability are grouped together so that they all compete together and are on an equal playing field. If in my classification, it can be anyone between someone like myself who is spina bifida or someone who's just, had their leg chopped off. So it's a bit of a big difference, but we all have the same upper body strength and the same upper body ability. So we don't need help to tie ourselves down, and therefore we can utilize that ability that we do have to do so. Whereas somebody who, let's say, is in the F32 class, which is for acquired brain injury and cerebral palsy, they don't have the ability to tie themselves down often. And if they do try and do it themselves, they'll fatigue and then they won't be able to throw it all. So to give them that advantage within their own classification and give them that opportunity to compete fairly, they have an aid there that helps them tie themselves down.
Now, we're here for podcasting. Our podcast, of course, today is Inclusion Talks with Dan Lonigan and Cindy McDougall. Julie Charlton is our guest. And, of course, Aussie Home Loans is our sponsor, and we deal with anyone in Australia. We've got clients in every state and capital city, and we do Zoom as well, or they do Zoom as well, and they've got over 25 lenders on their panel.
You use Specialised. You said that it is quite strict, I guess, in the way that it's made. Is it expensive and is it hard to, I guess, access that equipment to be able to facilitate inclusion?
Yes. So far in my career, it's taken me 16 years to have the place where I train actually agree to keep the throwing play out for me to train. So I couldn't even have it out to train for Birmingham. I had to beg and plead.
For Commonwealth Games, you had to beg for them to have accessible equipment.
Yes. So I had to beg, plead, and cry, basically, to have that put out for me. I only achieved it for half of my training block. I could not have it for the other times, which sucked. To get chairs made, you do kind of have to know a welder. But we are getting more well known in the community, and especially in the elite para space, where Paralympics Australia has an equipment fund, and I have applied and just received 2 throwing chairs that will be used for my squad, which is really fantastic. But it does take a while, and it is very specialised to every single athlete. I had an athlete competing with me back in 22, where her chair setup was so specific that she had to have a bar that came out from the front of her chair so that she could lean on it and hold on at the same time to be able to throw, because of the way that her trunk works. My chair is very generic. It's just the square with a pole. I can sit forward, I can sit sideways, but it's very generic. Some people have 2 foot plates, some people have 1. It's all very specialized to the athlete, and so that does determine the cost of everything. Obviously, to get it cheaply, it's going to be heavy. To get it light, it's going to be expensive. So it really does depend.
Just on that point, Julie, and for Dan's and our listeners' knowledge, those chairs actually get put on planes and come to competitions with you. So if you can get a lighter framed chair, it is definitely a lot easier when it comes to accessing airports and leaving airports and accessing the transport that you need to be going to and from your accommodation venues. So it's I guess one of those cases where expensive is great, but if you want to get into the sport, there are more affordable options that are available, and it's great that you were able to access some through a Paralympic fund, because that helps build that inclusion and stops those barriers. So that for me is huge. I think that's fantastic.
Sorry, Julie and Cindy, and we're here for Inclusion Talks for Aussie Home Loans, and Julie Charlton's our guest. What is the difference in price? So if you were to get the really good ones, are we talking a huge increase?
Yes. So a cheap chair can be anywhere between $200 and $500.
Right.
A expensive chair, upwards of $3,000.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Not easy money to find, is it?
Not easy money to find, no. So our Paralympians that are currently getting ready to head over to Paris, their chairs would be around the $2,500, $3,000 mark. Especially one of the athletes, one of my good friends, Dana, her chair packs down into a suitcase. And so it's very, very light, but also very, very technical. And that was quite expensive for everyone to come together to try and make.
There's money to be made, isn't there, Cindy? And Julie, if you are a decent welder, I'm sure there are a lot of decent welders out there. There might even be some now that might just concentrate on making sports wheelchairs for Paralympic athletes.
That would be lovely if they would.
Dana, as you're all aware, and Julie's pretty well aware, is a very close family friend of ours. And she's been very blessed that her coach, Gordon, actually went into making the chairs. And I think she gets to be a bit of a guinea pig on all of the new designs and the new ways of doing things, which is just incredible, because it's giving those opportunities to see how things work and how they can be better. And Dana, look, at this stage, will be on the podcast a couple of weeks after she comes back from Paris. She was going to be on a couple of weeks ago, but with being named on the squad, it got pushed back a little bit, and she's well and truly into her preparations. Now, on your front, Julie, you're a multiple state record holder. You were internationally ranked, and you still currently hold 9 Australian records in your classifications. I think they are for shot put, discus, and jab. Can you tell our listeners why there are different classification numbers next to those events? So in your case, you've got 2 or 3 different ones. What's your classification, and what are those different numbers?
Yeah, so classifications are the little categories that Paralympic sport has created so that people compete against those who have similar or same abilities as them. So for me, my classification right now is F57, which means that I am impaired below the waist. So it can be anyone from someone who's missing a leg to fully paraplegic to partially paraplegic, anything below the waist that impairs you from being able to do it standing to the best of your ability. My former classification was F42, so that basically meant that my impairment was as if I was missing one leg. And so it was kind of like an amputee class, but still with my ability, it was like I was missing legs because they don't work properly. But yeah, the classifications are there so that people can compete against those with the same abilities as them. So in Australia, we don't have the opportunity to have specific classification events. So I'm not just competing against F57s and medaling with F57s. I'm medaling / competing with everybody. And so we use a system called the MDS, where we compare our distance to our own world record. So my F57 world record, we get a percentage, so that percentage, and then those percentages get ranked against everybody else. So their distance against their world record, and so on and so forth. It just makes it a little bit fairer for those who have less ability than some others. So an F32 class who have cerebral palsy or acquired brain injury, they don't have the same upper body strength or movement or anything as me. And so they will be compared against their own class.
On that front, Dan, so with the classification, it has been great to see an increase in seated throwing in Australia in the last probably 3 to 5 years. So up until 3 or 5 years ago, Julie would be competing literally with every classification. So it could be cerebral palsy, it could be the F20, which is your intellectually disabled, it could be visually hearing impaired, everybody put in the same bit. But with the increase in throwers, and I really hope it keeps going because it's been awesome to see, it's allowed for seated throwing in some events, not all. to have the opportunity for seated throwers to be only up against other seated throwers. So instead of it being really broad and 10 different classifications as a possibility for medalling, it brings it back down to sort of 3 or 4, and I guess evens it out, which is a great sign that it's growing. But yeah, it'd be lovely to be able to see that at all events, not just where there is enough participation to warrant them calling it a separate event, I guess.
This is Inclusion Talks, our podcast looking at all ability sport. Julie Charlton is our guest. Cindy McDougall and Dan Lonigan are hosting it for Aussie Home Loans. Our areas of expertise include first home buyers, equipment loans, car loans, and also personal loans. A question to you both about the different categories. Does it indicate that the sport and Paralympics as a whole is developing and increasing dramatically, that we are getting new categories and we are getting more categories and we are giving more athletes with disabilities an opportunity to fulfill their dream?
Absolutely. We recently gained some more classifications for those with Down syndrome, which is fantastic to see, because they beforehand had their own games, and that's great. But I want to see even more inclusion. I want everybody to have the opportunity to be part of this community and be able to compete alongside each other like we all deserve to. Yeah, there are always new classifications popping up each season, which is nice to see, because that means that more effort and research and science is being put into parasport, so that these measures are being afforded from the highest of bodies.
And I think from my point of view, as most of our listeners would be aware, and as Dan is definitely aware, I have children that have ASD, but not intellectual disability. I have a daughter who has ASD and intellectual disability, and it's starting to filter down even with the ASD. So having the Down syndrome, or the trisomy, having their own classification was awesome, because they were actually expected to be regarded as an intellectual disability. And there is a lot of differences between Down syndrome and intellectual disability. So it was, I guess, in most of our eyes, quite unfair for them to have to be put into that same classification and have their results based off a result that could be from someone that is basically able-bodied but has an intellectual disability, when some of the Down syndrome athletes that were competing were nowhere near what you would term an able-bodied athlete. So it is great to see that. And look, I know that athletics are, with Sports Inclusion Australia's support, growing what is, I guess, termed the II3 classification, which is the ASD classification, and Swimming Australia have brought it in already. They have what they term an S19 for athletes with autism. So it's great to see that, but I think there is also a push worldwide to see inclusion grow for all disabilities. And I think until there are opportunities, and you know, it's going to be quite hard to include everybody and have the capacity to include everybody, but I think it's really important that those opportunities are there, and that, as Julie said, the research and I guess the talk and the widespread awareness grows, that truly, to remove barriers, you need to be all inclusive, and all inclusive means having, I guess, the mindset to realize that other classifications are eventually going to be needed.
That does it help too that Australia are so successful at Paralympics as well? They have a great record there. They win a lot of medals, that we are able to provide the opportunities to people with special needs, whether it be a disability that is physical, or a disability that you obviously can't see that is mental. But the fact that we can have the fact that we're having so much success, does it sort of help that we're able to cater for a large portion of these people with disabilities better than probably other countries at the moment, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, it will eventually help, to be fair. We need to be able to start from the grassroots pathways in order for the new athletes in these new classifications to actually recognise. because unfortunately I have seen in the past where new classifications have popped up, but they're not recognised by sporting bodies because there is no Paralympic pathway for them. The current focus is that there has to be a Paralympic pathway for it to matter, and that's not right. There needs to be a focus on, if there is a classification, we create a pathway to something that they can do, whether it is their own games, which, you know, the trisomy class have their own games. So that should matter. The deaf and blind classifications have their own games in certain sports. That should matter. But it doesn't always have to be Paralympic focused. And that's where policy needs to change from an Australian point of view. That will create a more inclusive pathway and therefore atmosphere for everybody.
We're here for Inclusion Talks, and we're talking about all ability sport, and we're with Julie Charlton, who of course is a Paralympian star. She's a coach now. Julie, Cindy mentioned you are an activist as well. Do you see yourself as maybe down the track having a role as an administrator in the Paralympic space?
Absolutely. That's been a dream of mine. I have always wanted to, well, when I first started, I was like always wanting to work for like the World Paralympic Committee or for Athletics Australia, or somebody who had the opportunity to make decisions, because my advocacy brain would turn on every single time something would happen and be like, well, if I was in the seat of decision making, I would do this or I would do that. And so, yes, I would love to have the opportunity to be a part of the sport section that actually makes decisions.
And we're here, of course, for Aussie Home Loans to deal with anyone in Australia. They've got clients in every state and capital, and we do, and they do Zoom as well, which, of course, we do with all our podcasts, especially here for Inclusion Talks. All yours, Cindy.
Jumping into your roles in advocacy, your passion for social justice and removing inequality is incredible, and you're very passionate about promotion through social media. In previous episodes, we've spoken about the negative side of social media. Have you ever encountered the bad side of social media? And if you did, what advice would you give someone who's trying to build a media presence, especially around advocacy or trying to allow themselves to be heard? What would you say to them to encourage them to keep going?
Absolutely. I've been quite lucky. I haven't faced as much as other people have, to be fair. I get quite often the pity, oh, you're in a wheelchair? Oh, I feel so sorry for you. No, don't. Yucky. Go away. No, actually, I hate the word inspirational for myself, because I don't want to feel like people think I'm inspirational for going to Woolworths. I want them to be inspired by the work that I do. And so that those are the ones that I face that make me feel icky. I've started working in the LGBT space because I am the Thrive with Pride ambassador for this year with the Australian Institute of Sport. And there have been so many opportunities, especially with the current situation that's happening in the Olympics right now, with the poor boxer who is intersex and is being accused of, cheating and all of this other stuff.
How do you feel about that? Can I ask you? How do you feel about that?
Frustrated beyond belief.
Okay.
Because she deserves to be in the sport of her choosing in the in the gender category of her birth that she identifies with, and not be criticized, accused of, or blatantly bullied out of being able to be at the highest level where she deserves to be. The gender testing that they did of the federation that she was a part of is not valid anymore. That whole organization was disbanded last year. None of it is valid. If she is currently in the Olympics right now and has gotten to where she is, that means that she has passed every single test that they have required of her to do.
So are you frustrated, therefore, Julie, like my colleague Glenn Mitchell, and as Cindy is aware, and you may be aware, I do another podcast called Dashing Down to Olympic Adventures, where I speak to past and present Olympians, read these games and past games and broadcasters. And Glenn, as Cindy would be aware, is one of the greatest. He is just an authority on everything and knows everything there is to know about Olympic sports. And he said it is frustrating that the journalists, because they're looking for a story, they're looking for a negative story. It sort of died off in the last couple of days, but for a few days there, despite all the great performances in the sports, they were all concentrating on this story. So I take it you're very frustrated by that.
Yes, I'm always frustrated with misinformation, and I'm frustrated with people spreading lies and perpetrating lies, but also not listening to facts. When they came out with an official statement saying, yes, she's got differing chromosomes. However, this is her. This is what her official documentation says. This is who she is. You have to listen to that, because you can't deny somebody of their own identity. That is wrong. And so
I think on my front, Julie, and you'd be aware of all this, is that people don't actually realise how common intersex actually is. That you can have the genitalia of your birth, but that does not mean that your DNA is that. And you may never know that. Yeah. You may go through your entire life and not be aware of that. And I think for me personally, I found it so frustrating, some of the comments around, about her genitalia. And, what's she competing when she's got men's parts? And it's like, she doesn't have men's parts. She's a girl. She's been raised a girl. She's gone through all the testing. And as Julie said, that organisation no longer exists. But does that come out in the media? No, because that doesn't make a good story.
Well, the Italian girl who she fought, who pulled out saying this is unfair, and then she quickly changed her story, you may be aware, and said it's unfair that my Olympic dream is over so quickly, but she made the decision to pull out.
Yeah.
Apparently, according to Glenn, she's been paid $100,000 from the International Olympic Committee or the International Boxing Association, one of the two. And I know the International Boxing Association had banned this Algerian boxer and also another one from Chinese Taipei due to their chromosomes. But the IOC had let them through. So, I mean, at the end of the day, has Carini done this deliberately to get the money? I don't know. I mean, it smells, this whole story for me.
You may never know.
We will never know, and it's not for us to say, but it is truly frustrating for the athlete that has gone through all of this to have her Olympic dream sort of tainted by all of this bullying, and it's truly not fair.
I think it's a shame that her integrity has been called into question. And I know that that's something you're very passionate about, is, keeping people honest and keeping people accountable. An interesting one from social media this week. On social media platforms, you made mention of the fact that it's been said in the media that there are only 5 Golden Slam winners in the history of tennis. And you rightfully pointed out there were 6, the 6th being Dylan Alcott. Given that Dylan is an incredible disability advocate and that the Paralympics are about to start, how do you think we can change the rhetoric to see people with a disability recognised for their incredible accolades and their advocacy that's out there, especially in the media, but also in the eyes of history?
Absolutely. I think we need to reshape our language around para-athletics or para-sport in general. Yes, keep our terms like para-sport, para-athlete, but we also have to recognise that we are athletes. We compete in all of the same competitions. We get the same awards. Like Dylan, for example, he competed at that able-bodied Grand Slam. He needs to be recognised in the Grand Slam list, along with all of those amazing able-bodied athletes that were in that list. Yet the media does not see that as valid. That's why they forgot to mention him. But when it comes to sensationalizing his efforts and his achievements, they will happily do that when it's around International Day People with Disability or when it comes to the Paralympics. So we need more representation out there and actually have para-athletes at these kinds of events. So we basically need our demonstration events back at the Olympics, like we had at the 2000 Olympics, where Louise Savage won 2 gold Olympic medals. And she's one of the only Paralympians who have a Olympic gold medal. We need that kind of recognition for people to start understanding, oh, right, a Paralympian can be an Olympian too, or a wheelchair tennis player can be a Grand Slam winner. We kind of need to take baby steps in showing society that here are your parallels between the two, and they're very much the same. We're all athletes and we all deserve to be recognized for the sport that we do.
There's a great person, a great athlete at the moment, Jared Clifford, who has competed both able-bodied and para, and he is one of those ones who are very proactive about making it visible that just because you're competing Paralympics doesn't mean that you can't also compete able-bodied. And he's kicked it up very much close to a lot of the able-bodieds and has brought a lot of awareness to it. And I think a lot of the key is to have Paralympic athletes and para-athletes be visible and be vocal and tell their stories. And that's part of the reason why we've built the podcast, is to get those stories out there, because I think especially around Olympic and Paralympic time, it is a great time to build that awareness of what is available and what is out there and what is possible for athletes, not putting them in any category, just athletes. Getting on to volunteering, because I really want to touch on that. You're an active volunteer in sport and everyday life. Can you tell us why you think it's important for people with a disability to help to support great causes or to get out and officiate and volunteer? Is it the same as what you've suggested there, to get that awareness out there that it's possible? Can you tell our listeners also about some of the roles that you're involved in volunteering?
Yeah, absolutely. It's incredibly important to have folks with disabilities out in volunteer roles, especially within community, because it will actually show what parts of society are accessible to us to be able to volunteer. And it creates awareness to those organizations that they need to make their volunteer organizations more accessible. But it creates those pathways to be able to see what we are capable of doing, but also what organizations are willing to do and how we can create accessible pathways. In sport, it's so important to have disability representation, especially in officiating and coaching. One of my favorite officials, Summer Giddings, I love watching her officiate because she's like almost completely blind, but she will officiate long jump like there's no tomorrow, and it's incredible because the accessibility measures that they've been able to put in for her to be able to do it just like everybody else, fantastic to see. Myself as a para coach, I'm one of the only ones in New South Wales who has a disability and coaches in throws, and I've had to pave my own way to make accessibility measures for myself and be able to coach to the best of my ability for my athletes. So a lot of coaching areas are on top of a grass hill behind a barrier. I've had to say, hi, no, I'm going to come sit on the track and be close to my athlete, because my athlete can't come over and talk to me and I can't come over and talk to them. So I'm going to need to be nearby. It's about creating those pathways. And once people see what is available and able to do, they will create those pathways for everybody else moving forward. So yeah, it's just about doing those little steps and, opening the eyes of people who may not understand or may not know. Yeah, some of the other organizations that I've been part of, like Hills Youth Army in my local council, I volunteer with Youth Action, and I volunteer with a lot of different advocacy organizations just to be able to spread awareness around disability. It's one of the best things I've ever done with my life, and I really enjoy it.
You ever thought of politics?
Definitely.
Definitely.
Definitely. Yes. No,
Really?
definitely.
That's good.
Yeah. No, definitely have thought of politics as part of my future. Um, Definitely as an independent, but because I would get too frustrated with big party politics. But it is definitely something that I want to have a hand in, because the funny thing, growing up, my mother said I could be whatever I wanted to be. And I said I wanted to be a tree. And
Great.
yeah, a tree. So for me now, as a 25-year-old, that tree is growing my branches out into every single little part of society that I can have a hand in. So if that means going into politics and having my say, then that's what I would do. I've worked at the ABC. I've done work with SBS. I've coached. I'm starting to officiate. Like, I'm putting my branches out so that I can have my say and make a change in any way that I possibly can.
Just if you were an independent politician, though, Julie, you wouldn't be able to have the influence or so-called influence that you could unless you were in a major party like Liberal or Labor, could you?
Yeah, well, I met Alex Greenwich yesterday at the protest, and he is one of the most influential politicians in New South Wales for inclusion in our state. He is the one that champions the Equality Bill. He's the one that's currently championing our Building Better Homes project with the Physical Disability Council of New South Wales. He, as the independent member for Sydney, has done more for inclusion than any of the two major parties have. And so I have full faith behind an independent member to make change.
Julie Charlton, who could become a politician down the track. She's a volunteer. She's a coach. We'll get to her coaching in a second. She's also had a lot of success in track and field as an athlete in the para sports. She's our guest today on Inclusion Talks, looking at all ability sports. That's our podcast that we do every week with myself, Dan Lonigan, and, of course, the star of the show, Cindy McDougall. We're here for Aussie Home Loans to deal with anyone in Australia. We've got clients in every state and capital city. We do Zoom as well, and they've got over 25 lenders on their panel.
About your coaching. So when did you begin training, and when you began training and competing, did you ever see yourself as a coach? What did that training squad look like when you first started?
Yeah, I did want to become a coach, but I didn't think I would actually do it until I was like much older or had retired from actually competing and things like that. I was never really part of a squad myself. There was times in my career that I was part of a squad for a couple of months, and then it would become too inaccessible. The squad couldn't facilitate my needs anymore. But yeah, I was 15 when I got my first athlete. She is about to make her Paralympic debut in Paris. Unfortunately, I'm not coaching her anymore, but I'm incredibly proud of Sarah. Sarah Clifton Bly, watch out for her. But yeah, her parents asked me to coach her when she was 12 and I was 15. And I'm so incredibly proud to see where she is now, about to make her Paralympic debut. But we grew up together, and so we were learning the sport as both young para-athletes, but also I got to learn what it was like to advocate on the other side. I got to learn the ins and outs of coaching and what it took to advocate for an athlete and actually make change. There were times that our competitions were cancelled, or we weren't allowed to do something that was important to our journey. And so I had to learn how to advocate for that. It was really, really eye-opening to do that as a child. Like, I was 15 through 19 when I was coaching Sarah. And so I was a child doing that. And it definitely has shaped my advocacy journey moving forward. And now I've got Ava, who's my little pocket rocket, and she's incredible. And I'm hoping to get some more athletes soon, but it's one of the most incredible experiences. And so I now run JC Squared Athletics as my coaching organization.
Has it
What do
made
you
you
think the
a
key
better
is?
athlete? Sorry, Cindy, has it made you a better athlete?
Absolutely. It absolutely has made me a better athlete because I get to see the perspective from both sides of what sport looks like. Because as an athlete, you kind of just sit there thinking, oh, my coach knows nothing. Like, I know they're telling me what to do, but blah, blah, blah. And like, you kind of just go with the flow. But when you coach and compete, you'll be like, oh, I need to apologize to every coach that exists ever. The stuff they go through is ridiculous. Like the politics of it all and the stress and the anxiety and the elation and joy and all of the differing emotions that we go through as coaches is incredible. But yeah, I need to apologize to every single coach that's ever existed. You do an amazing job, and I'm sorry for every athlete that's given you crap.
On those two, I've got two questions for you. What do you think the key is to being a good para coach? And what advice would you give to a coach who was thinking about or was approached by a para athlete based on that double knowledge that you have now?
So what would make someone a good para coach is listening to their athlete, actually knowing what their athlete needs, who their athlete is, and not making it a cookie cutter coaching experience. Like, not every athlete with spina bifida is going to be coached the same. Not every athlete with ASD is going to be coached the same. It is very unique to the individual athlete themselves. So talk to your athlete, see what they want out of each session, see what their goals are, where they want to head in their career. And if they want to reach the Paralympics, then you make a plan to make them to the Paralympics. But if they want to be a recreational athlete, shape your sessions to be recreational and let them have that fun. But even if they are going to reach the Paralympics, let them have fun. And my advice to anyone who wants to start coaching in the para space is it's not scary to coach para athletes. It just takes a little bit more time to do the research into the individual needs and specifications and rules. There is an entire IPC handbook for that. So read that and then talk to your athletes because they are the ones that are going to know the best about their own experience with their disability and their sport. So sit down, have a conversation, be on a human level with them, and then start that amazing journey that you'll have together.
And how do you think Sarah Clifton Bly is going to go?
I hope she's going to smash it out of the park.
Why?
I really, really hope she'll smash it out of the park. She's an incredible athlete, and I cried when she told me. I cried when she told me that she made the team, and so I'm so unbelievably proud of her.
I actually remember her first nationals, and I remember there were people in the crowd, and it always stuck with me. It was people who should have known better, but it stuck with me so much that she was so far back. Like, it was so incredibly hard for her. You could see the effort and the determination, but she was still at the 200-meter mark when a lot of the para athletes, my daughter was one of them, crossed the finish line. And the cheer from most of the people as she came down the home straight in her first nationals was incredible. But there were people there going, why is she even here? She's so far back. She'd actually broken a record in that race, even though she was that 200 meters back. And as all some of the people could see was that she was so slow, but all of us in the para world were going, oh my gosh, look at this. This is incredible. So to see her get to Paralympic level is just incredible.
Yeah, absolutely.
How have you seen para sport change since COVID? Do you think it is growing? And what do you think is needed to help it grow?
It's definitely growing because we all got to stay home and watch the Paralympics during 2021.
Yeah.
We all were stuck at home and had the opportunity to actually focus on it rather than it be a background on the TV, not really paying attention to it kind of experience. Everyone was forced to watch it, which was fantastic for me because I would just sit here and be like, yes, I can watch the Paralympics and no one can stop me. No one is going to force me to go outside. But
focusing on Sarah
Mm.
and making the Paralympics and what the experience would be like for her, I'd love to double back. And what was it like for you when you made your first Australian team? Can you explain what that felt like? Give us some of the emotions that she might be feeling right now.
I was incredibly anxious, and I know she is. We've talked about it multiple times, but
Can I ask what event it is, Julie? Sorry. Excuse
yeah,
me.
she's going in shot.
Okay, great.
Yeah, she'll be an F32 shot put.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really excited for her, and she is over the moon. Like, she's genuinely so excited to make the Paralympics because she made her first Worlds team last year, and her journey has just gone up and up in terms of her sport. And I remember my first team that I made was the 2016 World Junior Championships. It was self-funded, so my mother was the team manager, my cousin was the chef de mission, and I was the sole Australian team member. But I got the opportunity to make so many new friends from across the world. Again, that community of people that love the sport just as much as me. And Sarah will have that same experience at the Paralympics. And we had the same experience together in Birmingham at the Commonwealth Games, where we had a community around us of people who love sport and are all there for the common purpose of loving sport. And I can't wait to watch her. I will, no matter how early in the morning it is. I have no idea when she's competing, but I will wake up and I will watch it the entire way through. Don't care if it's 3 o'clock in the morning, I will do it.
8-hour time difference, Julie. I think we're starting to work that out with the Olympic Games.
Cool.
This is Inclusion Talks podcast. Julie Charlton is our guest. She's a Paralympian performer when it comes to athletics in track and field, particularly in the field events nowadays. She's a coach. She's a volunteer. She's an activist, and she might become a politician one day. And we're here for Aussie Home Loans. They've got over 25 lenders on their panel. So, Julie, and also Cindy, I wouldn't mind your view on this. The fact that ABC, and as you may be aware, I've worked for the ABC for a long time in radio, but TV did a lot of the Paralympics. They covered the Paralympics after the Olympic Games ended. How much has that helped Paralympics, do you think?
Tremendously. When I worked for the ABC as a sport intern, I was working under Amanda Shalala, and her wisdom, she's incredible.
Great.
Her wisdom and expertise in the para space is just, it can't be matched, honestly. And her advocacy within para media has made sure that the Paralympics, whenever it's shown on the ABC, is done to the highest quality, to the most respectful way, and it's not over sensationalized. So it's not cheering because someone's disabled, it's cheering because they've worked bloody hard to get to where they are, and they've worked their butt off for 10, 20 years to achieve whatever they're going to achieve. Like watching Madison D. Rosario get her first Paralympic gold medal at the last Paralympics. She's worked since she was 8 years old to get to where she is today, and that's incredible to watch. And so the ABC has done an incredible job with making sure that everything is not only respectful, but done to the highest quality.
And do you think, you've mentioned Dylan, do you think Ali Cole too, getting her start in television, and it's incredible, I think it's one of the worst shows on television, but I'm a celebrity, get me out of here, seems to get these people either back in the media spotlight or gives them an opportunity. And she was one of the best performers in the last series I hear. I didn't watch much of it, but she's working for Channel 9 and she'll work closely for them during the Paralympics. Do you think having great athletes who've had success in Paralympic sports, and in Dylan's case, wheelchair tennis, is also helping the profile of Paralympics and parasports and all ability sport in general?
Yeah, absolutely. I loved that Dylan and Ellie had the opportunity to commentate at the Olympics because it sort of set up the mindset that, you know, able-bodied athletes and para-athletes are on an equal playing field when it comes to being able to talk about sport. And Ellie and Dylan got to be like, hey, watch the Paralympics, they're coming up, and sort of set it up already, which is fantastic. But I loved seeing people just like myself on TV during a event that's not necessarily for me, but it felt like it could be, because I could see myself being part of the media team or being part of, the admin team, because I could be there and because of my love of sport.
I think it's definitely something that the ABC set in motion, if I put it that way, but that the mainstream media now are being really proactive about. And I think that is awesome. And I think it is going to open those pathways for what we're seeing now. And I think it is also going to build the profile of like to see, when you walk into Woolworths and when you are watching ads on TV and you see Paralympians there, that was not there 10 years ago. You just didn't see it. And I think making it visible, the amount of times I've been in the supermarket and there's been a little kid going, oh, that man's in a wheelchair and he's going to do basketball, just because it's in Woolworths. And the media coverage in the mainstream time slots, I think, is definitely helping to build a future where it is going to be a lot more normalized. It's horrible that we still have to think that way and hope for that, but it's great to see that it is growing. For you, Julie, I want to go back to your hopes and dreams. You've said you want to be a politician, but currently you're studying your Bachelor of Sports Coaching. Yep. What are your goals on that career path? And I always ask these questions. Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?
Yeah, so I started my Bachelor of Sports Coaching and Management right before the first lockdown. And so I got 3 weeks on campus before we went into lockdown. I want to be able to build my own coaching business and also have the business knowledge in order to spread and create awareness around disability sport. And so with JC Squared Athletics, which I have been running since I was 19, I have been able to build my business up and grow my own knowledge and expertise, which has been nice. But also being in that degree teaches the other people in the class what parasport is, because I was the only wheelie in my class most of the time. And so I actually got to lecture for them in their inclusive education and their inclusive coaching module during each degree. And that was incredible, because there were no people with disabilities or people who outwardly spoke about their disability at the uni. And yeah, it was really cool to be able to talk to my fellow peers and be like, hey, this is what I do. I have
lived experience.
Here's my lived experience. Here is all of my work experience that everyone requires. And I did it myself.
Now, Julie, I know you hate the I word, particularly as you say, and I think that is condescending. If someone says you're an inspiration to go to Woolworths in your wheelchair, so what? But I see you as an inspiration. Take the trip to Woolworths out with all the other things you do, which are very important. Honestly, do you see yourself as an inspiration in regard to Paralympics, in regard to your advocacy, in regard to your volunteering and your other aspirations, your coaching, etc.?
I don't think I would use the word inspirational. I would use a role model and a leader.
Okay.
Because that's what I want to be. I want to lead people towards an inclusive pathway. And I want to be a role model to kids just like I was in this space, to learn that it's not always doom and gloom. You're not always going to face barriers. And when you do face barriers, there are going to be people out there that will help you. There will be that Mr. Butcher, that Mr. Muir, your British PE teachers out there that will guide you towards a better path for you. Or there's going to be someone like myself who will be like, hey, I know how you're feeling. I've gone through the exact same stuff as you. Let's fix this together, because you're not alone. And that's what I wanted.
Sorry, have you stayed in touch with them, Mr. Muir and Mr. Butcher?
Yes, I still talk to Mr. Butcher. He didn't know the impact he had on me until I got into Com Games. I messaged him when I got accepted onto the team and wrote this massive post, and he found it about 2 days later because he's not very good with social media.
Right.
And he's just like, what? I didn't realize I had this much impact on you. I thought I was just helping. I'm like, this is how much you helped. And I'm still trying to get back in contact with Mr. Muir. He's had a couple of paternity leave things with his wife. But yeah, I love them both dearly, and what they have given me has changed my life forever.
Excellent.
If you could look back in 30 years' time, what would you hope your legacy was?
Great question.
I really hope that my legacy is that I have made life easier for folks with disabilities to live the life that they choose to live. I want people to be able to have control over their own lives and not have to live as though they have to depend on other people's timetables, other people's opinions on how they should live, on what politicians say that I have to do in order to be disabled enough to be
Rules and regulations.
Yeah. I'm not disabled enough to have the disability pension. Like
what?
Yeah. I'm a wheelchair user, and yet I'm too able to have the disability pension. So
I don't understand that. Why aren't you? What's the criteria? Or have I opened the biggest can of worms of all time here?
Yeah, the biggest can of worms. From what I understand of the criteria of the pension is that you have to be dependent on others for your personal care, your travel, your daily interactions, and your communication. So because I can get to and from places on public transport, because I can communicate for myself, because I can partake in my own daily care, I'm not eligible. And they say I can work a full-time job. I haven't been able to yet. I've found it way too difficult, but something that I'm working on with my advocacy journey is it's changing systems, and that's a really important part of my journey is systems change.
Just quickly, Dan, very last little bit. I have to say I'm so thrilled to see you in the media today after your advocacy yesterday of bringing to the attention of the Australian public that our Parliament House, which, as you told me earlier, has just undergone massive renovations, is actually not inclusive or disability friendly when it comes to certain sections of the building. Can you just give us a quick rundown? And I know we're coming close to the end of the podcast, but could you give us a quick rundown on that and what you hope to see change?
This is the New South Wales Parliament, though, isn't it? This isn't national Parliament. I presume national Parliament would be okay in regard to access for people using wheelchairs, would it not? I'd be mortified if it wasn't.
You can still only fit a certain amount of people into Australian Parliament,
Right.
but New South Wales Parliament cannot facilitate more than 2 wheelchairs at one time when watching the question time. So we were protesting yesterday about housing discrimination and how New South Wales has not signed up to the silver standard for housing accessibility, which in very general terms means fixtures in the bathroom that could facilitate future handlebars. Doesn't mean you have to put them in now. It means a little bit wider hallways. It means a step-free entry. And it means a bathroom on the ground floor of any housing establishment. Very simple, small things that can be put into any new build. Yet New South Wales says it's too expensive. The cost of it is only $4,000 extra per home, which could be subsidised by the government if they wanted to. Yet they say, no, this is too expensive. It is too hard. We are going to push this to the side. So that is what we were protesting yesterday. And we decided that we wanted to go watch question time. We went up to the top of the building to find that we could not accommodate any of us. They had closed it off, 2 wheelies, and we could not get inside. And so it was truly frustrating that for my state, the main house of any kind of politics does not accommodate folks with disabilities. And it was truly frustrating to see. And so we will continue to fight until New South Wales Parliament adopts the silver standard for housing.
Have you got a response yet from your television appearance or the fact there was some media coverage today? Has the minister responsible for this area come out? Has the opposition made a comment about it, even though they were in for a long, long time and probably did nothing about it? Has Chris Minns, the Premier, come out and made a comment about it yet? Or do you think he will?
Neither of the two main parties have spoken about it.
Yeah.
We had representation from the Greens Party and from the member for Sydney Independent, Alex Greenwich. He came to our protest yesterday and we handed them a signed petition letter, an open letter from the disability community to hand over to the Premier. They will be discussing it this afternoon, and we hope to hear back from them around 5 p.m.
This is why we need Julie in our parliament, Dan, and
Absolutely
more like
need her in
her.
our parliament. And we need to have you on more often too, even if it's just to discuss different issues. I mean, we've heard your story today, which is, I'm going to use it again, Julie, the I word, absolutely sensational. You're a role model. It's been brilliant chatting to you. We wish you all the best in your future endeavours, especially your coaching career, your degree you're doing at the moment, certainly in your career as an athlete as well. It's been wonderful chatting to you for our podcast, which is Inclusion Talks. Cindy has organised this guest. She's got some magnificent guests. All I do is sit here and open my trap and hope something decent comes out. And we're here for Aussie Home Loan to deal with anyone in Australia. We've got clients in every state and capital city. We do Zoom as well. And they're areas of expertise for Aussie Home Loan. And we thank, of course, Ben and Matt for making it possible for us to be able to do this by jumping on board to get behind us, purchasing a property, owner-occupied or investment, building a property portfolio, refinancing, debt consolidation, cash-out construction, pre-approvals, first-home buyers, equipment loans, car loans, personal loans, and they've got over 25 lenders on their panel. Julie, it's been a pleasure. All the very best, and we hope that Sarah Clifton-Bly, one of your very first students in regard to coaching, has a ripper at the Paralympics. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.